One of them is he's calling his brand of jiu-jitsu American Jiu Jitsu or AJJ. He's not the first one. Like I think Jake Shields was.
I think it has tattooed, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think Jake Shields was like the first guy to put out
Yeah.
American Jiu Jitsu as a brand,
Yeah.
right? So, but he would be essentially following that lineage. So I guess we can start there, and we'll go to the second one afterwards. So, like, my thoughts on it, you can call it whatever you want, I suppose. It seems kind of weird in the sense because he is training. He learned Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, right? Like this, even though I know he was somewhere else before. I think Lloyd Irvin, then Lloyd Irvin. And even though Lloyd Irvin's American, it's still Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, and he doesn't brand it any differently. And then he went to Atos, and that's more Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. So I guess there would have to be a clarification. What makes your Jiu Jitsu American?
Yeah, I think it just depends. For there are two different things here. One of them is, are you claiming it as Brazilian or American or Japanese or Argentinian? Because for nationalistic purposes, I was born here, I'm proud of my country, I love my country, I don't want to practice a sport that has someone else's country on there, right? And that will be one motivation. The other one will be, are there cultural traits that have been assimilated into the martial art itself? Not only just on the technical level, but even on the social level, right? And I've always been of two minds. I'm like probably better positioned than most people because of this, because I've done a lot of training in Brazil here. I got dual citizenship. And my take on it initially was always to be against any kind of nationalism, because that's how I saw, like, why Brazil? We didn't call it Brazilian Jiu Jitsu in Brazil, incidentally. Like, you don't go to China, ask for Chinese food. I actually did that in Thailand. I asked for Thai tea in Thailand. They were looking at me like I'm crazy, But like, no one calls it Brazilian Jiu Jitsu in Brazil. It's like, why call it here? So I didn't like it at first. But I understand why a lot of people wanted to use it, because there's a lot of people that still make the association with the traditional Japanese jiu-jitsu, often, swords and spears. It's the things that we don't practice. So it doesn't, because what we practice, we call it Brazilian jiu-jitsu. I actually think we should call it Brazilian judo, if you ask me. It's a far more appropriate term to call it Brazilian judo, because that's what it is. It's a variant of judo. That's all it is, right? But we call it Brazilian jiu-jitsu. And I actually, I don't like it for the nationalistic purposes, because I don't think they belong in martial arts. I love the fact that the IBJJF circuit is fought amongst teams and not nations. I like that, because all of a sudden you find yourself rooting for the guy that's from Mexico or Bulgaria over the guy that was born in the same country you were. It's kind of a break of that, like, Olympic thing of like Americans versus Russians or so on.
Right.
I'm not against. I mean, honestly, it doesn't really matter. Like I said, it doesn't. For practical purpose, it makes no difference. But there seems to be a little element of resentment in why he's calling American Jiu Jitsu, particularly now. He's been very critical of IBJJF, and he feels that IBJJF has conspired against him throughout his career to prevent him from winning because he's American. Right? I don't believe that. I think it's not the case for a lot of other Americans who have won. Like Musumeci was just here. He won 3 world titles, So, and his matches have been somewhat controversial too. Like, some of them are very close. Like, in that Mikey was never one of those guys. I mean, if you look at his every world title he's won, David, he wasn't like putting people away. It wasn't like one of those decisive wins. They were like won by advantage or barely, very close calls, which is typical of the division too. So I think it's more out of maybe the resentment towards the fact that he feels that Brazilians have been unfair, or IBJJF specifically has been unfair throughout his career.
Yeah, and I've been to some of his early matches back when he was still with Lloyd Irvin. I believe he was a brown belt. He was fighting in the Worlds, I believe it was the Worlds, brown belt Worlds with a gi. And I was coaching him because Lloyd was coaching someone else. And I saw some really bad calls, horrendous calls, where he swept the guy, got into the mount, got the back mount, got back into the mount, and had no points the whole time, which could have been like easily a 10-point sequence, depending on who was scoring it. And then I remember I was just saying, just finish him because you're not getting points. And then he got a triangle afterwards. And that was just one match I saw. So I'm sure he's had a few of those, and that might have colored, And that, again, that's one match, But I think more important is if you have a thought in your mind already, and then you start getting confirmation bias, right? Like you start seeing things happen. Oh, it happened because of this.
Yeah.
And
you see what you want to see.
Yeah, and so you start seeing what you want to see, right? So I'm sure there's some historical precedent for that, but like you said, there's Americans have won now. I think that kind of, you might say it might have been existed in the past, maybe, but at this point, I think it's probably not there. But I do believe you're right in the sense where the spirit of this is coming from is like maybe a spite, more of a renegade type thing.
Yeah.
More maybe a marketing angle, like, hey, everybody's doing this. I'm the young American guy. I'm doing American Jiu Jitsu now, right?
Especially Americans are fiercely nationalistic. The other thing is Brazilians are not. Like, I grew up in Brazil. I know this.
Yeah.
Like, Brazilians are not. I mean, the only time Brazilians are fiercely nationalistic is when they play soccer against Argentinians, particularly. Then they're dead serious about it. Other than that, like, they're really not. Every now and then you see these guys, they walk in a cage with the Brazilian flag, and it's like so not like them to do that. I think because maybe they're, maybe because Brazil doesn't do well in a lot of sports. I mean, consider the size of the country when you really look at it. It's like soccer, volleyball, jiu-jitsu, MMA. There's like a handful of other sports where Brazilians like competitive at.
Right.
So I think it's almost like one of those things that in your face, like, here's my flag, but they overall, generally, I think the vast majority, there's statistics on this, the vast majority of Brazilians cannot sing the national anthem. Like, they don't know it. Granted, it's a really long one. Like, it's their excuse for not knowing. It's really. I actually do. I can see it from beginning to end. But I don't think they're national. I don't think there's anything going on other than confirmation bias. I mean, he'd probably bet if you could actually measure it, maybe they were unfair with him in some situations. But I think that happens to everyone, man. Like, I've been screwed playing. I grew up in Brazil, man. Like, I know what it's like to be an American in Brazil. And Brazilians don't consider me Brazilian.
Right.
That's the thing. Like, I'm Brazilian, maybe considered as in here. When I'm in Brazil, I'm full-on American.
Yeah, you're considered the half-breed. Some people won't consider you American here, and then you're not considered Brazilian there.
I never felt it. I got screwed playing. I just never felt they were unfair with me because of my nationality. It never crossed my mind. I don't believe that. I think they were unfair with me because, I like this guy. I'm friends with him. I train with him. He's my buddy. You beat me last week, so I'm going to I don't know. Maybe some dumb reason like that. But not, you were born in a different country. I'm going to screw with you, And in the case of IBJJF, I don't believe it for other reasons. First of all, the best trained referees out there by far, in my opinion. By far. In the grappling, submission, wrestling, jiu-jitsu circuit, by far the best trained referees. Granted, the rules are very complicated, but they have a financial interest in making jiu-jitsu neutral. You got to remember,
right?
I'd say the financial factor. I don't think that is a motivation, but if they were, I don't believe that IBJJF is motivated by that solely. But like, if that were a motivation, let's argue for argument's sake that it was a motivation, wouldn't they be biased towards Americans, which is like 80% of their market?
Yeah.
The vast majority of the money is coming from the United States. If they were to make a decision, to me, it'd be the opposite, if anything. Which clearly there's no conspiracy. You cannot get like 20 referees in the room and go, by the way, when Keenan fights, we're gonna make sure he loses. Like, come on, guys. Like, who believes that? But I just don't see it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think more the reason he's doing it is more just for the marketing angle of it, and maybe
it works.
And a little bit of spite. And you got to use what you got. So, but I think as far as like the legitimacy of it, I don't know, because I'm seeing the origins of where his martial arts came from. It was essentially all BJJ.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I could make a case I'm doing American Jiu Jitsu.
You could make a case.
Because
that's a good point.
Because
Jake Shields could too.
Jake Shields.
I think Cesar Gracie a lot.
Cesar Gracie. Like, I have more of a case because I didn't have anybody. Yeah. Like, I was learning from grappling magazines, and the coach I had, he was a judo black belt.
Good point.
Japanese Jiu Jitsu black belt, but he wasn't really in BJJ. He didn't have any ranking in BJJ. And I didn't until I was already beating black belts. Yeah. And then I got it afterwards. So I can make a case for that, but I don't. Like, I don't care. Like, I have my own brand, freestyle fighting. That's the style that we do. We have our own ranking system and all that. So I get the idea of wanting to start your own brand,
Yeah.
But it's also not an original name. That's why I was saying, like, the only guy I could think of was Jake Shields. Was the first guy.
People have been flirting with it for a while.
But he was the only guy that I know prominently that was pushing AJJ.
Yeah, and then it kind of died, and then they're trying to make a comeback now. And then there is. I think that at the end of the day, it's kind of funny because he's still going to be practicing under IBJJF. It's not like unless you want to create a new federation, which is like, good luck with that, man. If you're running a gym is hard, imagine a federation. It's like a whole new operation there. But Yeah, I mean, like if it's, I respect people, wanting to do things and going a different route. I just don't think it's. Maybe I would agree with dropping the Brazilian if it weren't for the reason why people want to drop the Brazilian in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. And I think the reason why is if it's out of spite and resentment, then no, that's not a good reason. It's like, you know what? It just makes the word really long. Most people are educated enough to not confuse it with traditional Jiu Jitsu anymore. We can
Yeah.
drop it for that reason. Like, oh, yeah, for that reason, it makes sense to me.